Sometimes you have a moment. It's rare, it's fleeting, it's impossible to manufacture, and definitely not happening in a Sephora. When a fragrance actually just stops being molecules and chemicals and becomes something else entirely. When time distorts, when you're confronted with something so vast that your brain can't quite process. When your entire sense of self shrinks. And not because it's cold. See, all my life I've been told, Raff, you think outside the box. Now, I used to take that as a compliment because I wanted to believe it, and I like compliments. There's a hole in the bucket where I keep my compliments. But later, when I was sick for a while, I had the chance to think about this deeply. And I thought, I don't really think outside the box. I mean, my thoughts certainly feel very normal to me. Why am I so outside of the box to others? And I thought, if the box represents all you know, then how can you think about anything outside of that? It's actually not possible. See, if you visualize people walking around with like boxes on top of their heads, or with different shapes and sizes, that box contains all they know. Everyone's box is different, I guess, because different people know different things. And some of the things we put in the box are the same, and that's why we can communicate and understand each other. But sometimes, someone might say something and you're like, damn, I never thought about it like that, and I never would have thought about it like that. You must be an out-of-the-box thinker. No. I mean, maybe I think outside of your box, but I'm well within mine. I mean, to reiterate, people can and do grow their box. They can put things in there and take things out, but you can never think about something outside of it because it's outside of the realm of their knowledge. I call this box theory. And yes, I made it up. And apparently I'm not the only one that's thought about this, because there's a dude called Dacher Keltner. He's one of the world's foremost emotion scientists, a job which I would like to have that job. Anyway, he calls this awe, not like, oh, that's cute. No, more like awesome kind of awe. And he defines it like this. He says, awe is the feeling of being in the presence of something so massive that it transcends your understanding of the world. Big words. I wonder what they mean. So in 2003, Keltner and his psychologist partner, Jonathan Haidt, who's probably more famous than he is, suggested that awe experiences can be characterized by two things. One is a perceived vastness, as in it's huge, and then the other one is a need for accommodation. Vastness doesn't actually have to be physical. It can be conceptual, perceptual, semantic. You could be standing in front of the Grand Canyon thinking, damn, that's a big-ass hole. Or it can be the moment that you spray a fragrance and realize your entire conception of what rose can smell like was embarrassingly limited, and you've been wearing the olfactory equivalent of clip art. All arises in encounters with stimuli that are vast or beyond one's cultural perceptual frame of reference. What this actually means in English is your brain has to rebuild its filing system on the fly because what you're experiencing doesn't fit in any existing category. And so, your brain hates that because it has to do work. And your brain hates work because it's essentially geared for efficiency over anything else. Which is why most people avoid genuine awe like it's cardio. But really nothing is as bad as cardio. Now, if you're still watching, you may be thinking, Raff, the fuck you talking about, boy? I turned in to see the top 10 fragrances that will make you wet the bed. Relax. I'll talk about fragrances now. Here's what makes awe, or the lack thereof, relevant to fragrance. We rarely talk about awe in the context of perfume because we've reduced fragrance discourse to performance metrics, compliment fishing, and clone debates. We've turned something that's potentially transcendent into Amazon product reviews with our own cute little vocabulary. How's the longevity? Is it beast mode? How far does it project? Did Karen from accounting tell you that you smell nice? Nobody's asking, did it fundamentally alter your perception of reality for 4 to 6 hours depending on your skin chemistry? Yeah. But anyone who's experienced genuine olfactory awe knows there's a moment when a fragrance doesn't just smell good, it fundamentally reorganizes how you understand smell itself, and possibly reality, and maybe your credit card limit. Alright, enough woo, let's talk science, bitch! The science here is, in my opinion, very fucking dangerous and explains why I think fragrance companies should probably be regulated like pharmaceutical companies. I'll explain. You see, human brains are delicious. No. Human brains are actually prediction machines. That's what I meant to say. They predict everything around you. There are about double the number of connections that go from your brain outward to your senses than there are inward to your brain from your senses. What your brain is effectively doing every microsecond is predicting what you're going to see, hear, touch, feel, smell. And your senses, what they do, I guess, is just provide a type of error correction to say how many times have you felt your phone vibrate in your pocket, and you reach your hand into your pocket and find not only did your phone not vibrate, it wasn't even in your pocket, but that vibration that you felt was real because your brain predicted that, hey, I think it's about time his phone vibrated because that's what it usually does at a certain time interval, and it made you feel a vibration in your pocket. However, this time it got noticed because it was wrong. And the only way you know your brain got it wrong is because your senses error corrected it. Your phone didn't vibrate, and neither did your dildo, because why would you keep that in your pocket? Weirdo. Sights, sounds, and other sensory information must first travel through your brain's thalamus, which is like a processing center for stimuli, before it actually reaches your amygdala and your hippocampus, which is your emotion and memory. However, in contrast to that, the olfactory system, the smell mechanism, is positioned right next to them. Smell is the only sense that bypasses your brain's rational processing centers and goes directly to the emotional control room. It's like having admin access to your own consciousness. When an odor molecule enters the nasal cavity and binds to receptors, and signals are transmitted directly to the olfactory bulb and then immediately to the limbic system, where the amygdala and the hippocampus live, these are areas crucial for emotional processing and memory formation. This is why smell-evoked memories tend to be more emotional and more likely to expend further back in your life than compared to memories tied or triggered by other senses. A photo album is nice, but it's nothing compared to a fragrance album, like the one I have behind me. 75% of our emotions are actually influenced by scent, and we are 100 times more likely to remember something we smell over something we see, hear, or touch. Let me repeat that for effect, I guess. 75% of your emotions, that's not some, it's not an insignificant portion. 3/4 of your daily emotional experience is being hijacked by invisible molecules you're not even consciously aware of. And we treat this like it's just about smelling nice. Oh, well, how many panties will it drop? Fragrance has direct access to the exact neural pathways that generate awe. While you're looking at the Grand Canyon through your rational cortex, right? You're trying to process vastness with inadequate language like big or, oh, it's pretty, A fragrance bypasses all of that shit and triggers awe before your conscious mind even knows what's happening. The first time I smelled real oud, not the synthetic approximation that smells like a boardroom decided what exotic should be, but the actual aged agar wood oil, my brain essentially experienced a blue screen of death. Bonk, trying to categorize it. Is it woody? Is it animalic? Is it medicinal? Is it spiritual? Did someone set fire to a temple in a forest next to a stable where they make blue cheese inside of fake leather shoes and then bottle the smoke? Is that what happened? My entire framework for fragrance had to expand to include something that smelled like ancient temples and dying forests, and somehow also like home, if home was a 12th century monastery where monks were having existential crises. In that moment, I grew my box. That's olfactory awe. That's what it is. And it's terrifying because you realize how much control you don't actually have over your own consciousness. My unique concept for this video is olfactory ego death, the small self effect when fragrance dissolves your identity. It's the phenomenon where a fragrance bypasses rational processing so completely that the wearer's sense of individual self temporarily dissolves, creating what neuroscientists call the small self effect. You stop being a person wearing fragrance and become consciousness experiencing vastness. Unlike visual or auditory awe, which must be processed through the thalamus, olfactory awe has direct limbic access, making ego dissolution happen faster and more completely than most any other sensory experience. Studies have found, and I love studies finding things, that awe can create a diminished sense of self, an effect that's called the small self, creatively titled anyway. People draw physically smaller representations of themselves after being prompted to experience awe. And they did this with tourists at Yosemite National Park, which I think when I was a kid I used to call it Yosemite. Anyway, tended to choose smaller circles to represent themselves than tourists at, say, San Francisco's Fisherman's Wharf, which kind of makes sense because one of them involves confronting the sublime majesty of nature, and then the other involves confronting the sublime majesty of overpriced clam chowder and sad sea lions. And this is the part that nobody talks about in fragrance reviews. I mean, we're obsessed with projection, with longevity, with sillage, with compliments, all the metrics that center the self. How do I smell? How far does my fragrance project? How many people noticed me? Fragrance is used as a blunt instrument of ego amplification, which is the exact opposite of awe. Really genuine olfactory awe dissolves the self entirely. When you encounter a truly awe-inspiring fragrance, you stop existing as a person wearing fragrance and become consciousness experiencing something vast. And that's true with anything that elicits awe, but more true with olfactory awe. The boundaries between you and the scent blur. You're not smelling it. You're in it. You've been consumed by it. You're a passenger in your own nose. Like, I remember the first time that I wore Gucci Pour Homme 1 on clean, freshly bathed skin. I wasn't performing it for Instagram because it wasn't around. I wasn't reviewing it for content because your internet wasn't really a thing. I wasn't really wearing it to impress anyone. I was just sitting alone in a room like a reasonable person having a completely unreasonable olfactory experience. And somewhere around the 2-hour mark, I stopped being able to tell where my skin ended and where the fragrance began. The cedar and the papyrus and incense had created something so enveloping that I, as a concept, temporarily ceased to exist. That's the small self. That's awe. That's also probably why monks use incense, because it's easier to contemplate the infinite when you can't remember your own name. Awe reduces activation in the default mode network where self-representation takes place. You stop being an NPC for once, but you're also not the main character because you're the game. The default mode network isn't just people describing with words what awe feels like. There's actual brain scans that show that the self is actually quiet. The part of your brain that maintains the narrative of you temporarily goes offline when you experience awe. That's fucking crazy, bro. And fragrance, with its direct limbic access, can achieve this faster than almost any other sensory experience. I mean, fuck ayahuasca. Give me some ISO-E super. This is why we should probably stop treating it like luxury body spray and start treating it like what it actually is. It's a consciousness-altering substance that happens to smell better than most other consciousness-altering substances, because odor magic mushroom would be disgusting. Trust me. I feel like I'm letting you in on one of the best kept secrets of all time because, get this, there were studies done on people in more than 25 cultures worldwide. They did some daily diary work where they wrote daily in their diaries about awe. When the results were studied, they found that people experience awe through encounters with other people's courage and kindness. Expected, but other things like nature, collective gatherings, music, visual art, religious and spiritual practice, epiphanies, and births and deaths. All these things were related commonly to awe, but nobody listed fragrance. Why? I'll tell you why. Because we've systematically stripped fragrance of its capacity to inspire awe by treating it as a consumer product rather than an art form. We review fragrances the way we review toasters. Performance, value, features. Does it make the toast golden brown? Does it project toast across the room? Does it have toastgevity? Is it toast mode? We've commodified transcendence, and then we complain that we feel empty. What a brilliant strategy. Sounds very human. Watching water cascade over a majestic waterfall may elicit awe, as may the sheer speed of an Olympic sprinter or the ominous rumbling of thunder in a violent storm. Fragrance can access all of these. The beauty of a perfectly composed rose that makes you question whether you've actually ever smelled a rose before or just smelled the idea of a rose. The threatening power of animalic oud that smells like it might actually be dangerous, like it could actually hurt you if you wear it too much. The supernatural quality of certain natural essences that smell like they shouldn't exist according to the laws of chemistry as we understand them. The ability demonstrated by a perfumer who can make you smell colors, feel textures, experience emotions that you don't have names for. It makes me feel so effervescent. Shut up. But not all awe is good awe. Dark awe, actually, is about a quarter of the experiences of awe, and these are characterized by peril and threat. Now, I've experienced this with certain challenging fragrances. Nebulous by Boadicea the Victorious, for instance, or Vintage Kouros. These don't comfort, these confront. They are vast in their refusal to be pleasant, in their insistence that beauty isn't always pretty, and sometimes beauty is actually kind of horrifying. Like when a volcano erupts, it's the awesome destructive power of nature that will instantly diminish your sense of self. That's awe too. Both awesome and awful find their etymological roots in awe. The original meaning included dread, terror, reverence, the full spectrum of encountering something beyond your capacity to process. Some fragrances are awesome. Some fragrances are awful. The truly great ones are both simultaneously, which is why you'll smell them and think this is either genius or it's a crime against humanity. And both answers are correct. This is where I start to make some connections between awe and some other things that I think are more pragmatic. Awe is also healthy because brief doses of awe help your heart, your immune system, and they help your stress. They help your reasoning. They help with your relationships. When Jennifer Stellar looked at the relationship between the cytokine system and various positive emotions, she found that of all of the positive emotions, only awe predicted reduced levels of cytokines to a statistically significant degree. Now, cytokines are inflammatory markers that are associated with chronic illness. This study raises the possibility that some of the pernicious effects of poverty can actually be due to awe deprivation. Now, I'll say that again. Poverty might literally be killing people partially through the lack of access to experiences that inspire awe. And I'm not referring only to financial poverty, because that's probably where your mind went. There are multiple kinds of poverty: educational poverty, health poverty, spiritual and social, etc. And I would say that we're in an epidemic of social poverty. Meanwhile, we're over here with literal bottles of transcendence, of potential transcendence, I should say, spraying them while checking TikTok, reducing consciousness-altering substances to, does it smell good enough to wear to the office? The resource inequality of awe access is staggering, and we're contributing to it by treating fragrance as a luxury consumption rather than what it could actually be, which is democratized access to daily transcendence. And that contributes to your health. In a recent study, experiences of awe were found to be ubiquitous in daily life. People found themselves in the presence of something that inspired awe about every third day on average. Most significantly, the moments of awe that were documented predicted enhanced well-being weeks later. Weeks later. It's a long-tailed feeling. But how many fragrance wearers are actually experiencing awe? How many are just chasing compliments or performance metrics or the next dopamine hit from unboxing a bottle? We've turned fragrance into another consumption category when it could be a daily awe practice. Keltner, the guy I mentioned before, he recommends checking in with opportunities for awe that surrounds us, suggesting activities like live music. He says go to art galleries, spend some time outdoors. But he never mentions fragrance, and I think fragrance belongs on this list. And it's more accessible than most of those other options. The difference is intentionality. I mean, you can spray Sauvage while checking your phone and scrolling through emails and mentally planning your grocery list. Or you can sit with Tower's L'air du Désert Marocain for 10 minutes in silence, like a psychopath, letting it reveal layers you didn't know existed, feeling your sense of self temporarily dissolve into orange blossom and incense until you're not sure if you're a person experiencing fragrance or a fragrance experiencing personhood. One is consumption. The other is awe practice. One maintains your ego, the other dissolves it temporarily, which might be exactly what you need. Now, I can't leave without actually providing some practical advice, let's say, about how you can apply this learning. The fragrances that are likely to inspire awe, they're not necessarily the most complimented, They're the ones that make you ask, how is this even possible? How did someone capture this in a bottle? What kind of sorcery is this? And should it be legal? They're the fragrances that don't make sense until they make too much sense. The ones that smell like memories you haven't had yet, for places that don't exist or emotions that need new names. Dacher Keltner says, awe should be a practice, not something you wait for, not something that requires a trip to Yosemite or the Taj Mahal or a trust fund. It's something that you cultivate daily through intentional attention to vastness, mystery, and beauty. I say, fragrance offers one of the most accessible pathways to daily awe because it bypasses rational processing entirely. 75% of our daily emotions are influenced by scent, which means we're already swimming in olfactory stimuli. The question is whether we're paying attention or just swimming with our eyes closed while yelling about performance metrics. I own too many fragrances. I know. I buy too many fragrances. I'm aware of this too. And I participate in all of the consumption patterns that I critique. Self-awareness doesn't exactly equal behavior change, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But occasionally, maybe once a month, maybe less, maybe only when I remember to actually pay attention like a functional human, I'll spray something and experience genuine awe. The self shrinks, time distorts, and I'm confronted with something vast that I don't understand and that I can't control. And for those few minutes, collecting stops being about having and becomes about transcending. Ownership becomes irrelevant, status signaling becomes absurd, and the entire fragrance discourse reveals itself as an elaborate distraction from the only thing that actually matters, which is the direct experience of something beyond comprehension. Awe is our response to powerful things that are obscure, vast, and mysterious. Fragrance, at its best, is all three. At its worst, it's just expensive air freshener that we've convinced ourselves means something. But really, the tragedy isn't that we can't afford the bottles that we might inspire awe. The tragedy is we've trained ourselves to spray them while scrolling through our phones, reducing potential transcendence to background noise. We're turning consciousness-altering substances into status symbols and wondering why we feel empty despite owning hundreds of bottles. We're not lacking access to awe, not at all. We're actively avoiding it because awe requires surrendering control, and we'd rather maintain our small, comfortable selves than risk encountering something vast enough to dissolve us entirely.